Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Idahoan Show. First off, let me apologize if there's any wind noise on the camera. It's kind of windy out here, but I had an opportunity to try another edible plant and I didn't want to pass up this opportunity, so we're making do with the weather that we've got. Anyway, this is known as fireweed on account of the fact that it's one of the first things to come back after a forest fire, and it tends to bloom in profusion in burned areas like we see here. As I said, I'm told that this plant is edible, so let's see what it tastes like. Interesting, complex, multi-phase flavor. The texture of the leaves is almost identical to spinach, and the flavor is pretty similar too, especially at first, but after you chew on it for a while, it gets sort of tangy, almost like spinach that's been cooked with lemon or something. And then eventually the tanginess sort of fades out and you get almost like a hot pepper spiciness to it. Mild, of course, but a little bit of a hot pepper tint. So, yeah, sort of an interesting, complex flavor, but still very reminiscent of spinach. Now, my favorite way to eat spinach is in spinach dip. So, I think what I'm going to do is pick some of this stuff and take it back to my kitchen and make some fireweed dip with it. Basically, spinach dip substituting fireweed for the spinach. Let's see what it's like. Okay, this recipe calls for 10 ounces of blanched spinach greens, 3/4 cups of evaporated milk, 1 cup of mozzarella cheese, 4 ounces of cream cheese, 1 tablespoon of garlic powder, 1 tablespoon of onion powder, and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. However, I've only got about 5 ounces of fireweed, so I'm going to make a half a batch. Not sure how much of a difference it's going to make, but before we get started, I think I'm going to chop up the fireweed greens a little bit. Now I need to blanch our fireweed greens. So to do that, I've put enough water in this pot to cover them, although I have not put the greens in the pot yet. I'm going to get the water boiling, and then we'll put the greens in and boil them for just a couple of minutes before we take it off the heat and drain off the liquid. Now that I've got the fireweed blanched and drained, I'm going to go ahead and add the other ingredients and then cook them together until it looks like spinach dip. Okay, I ended up adding a little bit more mozzarella cheese and evaporated milk than what the recipe called for because it seemed like the fireweed leaves didn't cook down as much as spinach would. I would guess that the fireweed probably has more fiber and less water in it than domestic spinach would. Anyway, so I changed the proportions a little bit, didn't write down the exact proportions, but I've got something that looks like spinach dip, so we'll let this cool a little bit and then try it and see how it tastes. Alright, so I let it cool, transferred it to this bowl, and sprinkled a few of the blossoms on top for decoration. Now comes the moment of truth, where we determine if it's actually worth eating. Well, the flavor is virtually indistinguishable from spinach dip. However, the texture is a little bit different. The fireweed definitely has more body, it takes a little more chewing. I guess you could consider it like a high fiber alternative to spinach dip. Now, that said, since it has more body, it's easier to break off a chip in it by mistake, and it takes a little more chewing, so I don't know that that's necessarily a desirable characteristic of a dip like this. I don't know that I will necessarily do this again just for its own sake. But that said, it's not bad. It's worth eating if it's all you've got. And it might be worth making again just as a novelty to expose somebody to. Certainly it was an interesting experiment. And until next time, thank you for watching The Idahoan Show.